much. Our next speaker is Dr. Emil Martinez, who has obtained his PhD in theology in 2018 from Babeș-Bolyai University in Cluj-Napoca, Romania. His research interests lie at the intersection of Orthodox spirituality, contemporary asceticism, and digital media. And he recently published his PhD dissertation entitled Contemporary Asceticism in Father Sofroni Sakharov, Amilianos of Simonopetra, and Basil Pennington, Conceptualization and Comparative Study. The book was published in Romanian. And now Emil is going to talk to us about constructions of peace in Father Thaddeus of Vitovnica, God's Revelation in a Pandemic World. Emil, whenever you're ready.
Yes, thank you very much. So a little bit of context here related to my presentation. We know that during the COVID-19 pandemic, one could notice the excessive amount of disturbing news in the world, like fake news, protests, propaganda, debates for different restrictions on all levels. And this includes the life of the church and of the individual Christians as well. And it creates a context of turmoil, of anxiety and unrest, which is more or less a strong wind in which God's voice cannot be clearly heard. As we know, Prophet Elijah heard the voice of God as a whispering wind and not as a violent storm or destructive fire. Therefore, the discourse on peace is particularly important in an unprecedented pandemic context. And who is the most suited person to speak on this, if not the one who can be called the father of peace, Elder Thaddeus of Vitovnica? And the main point of this article is to extract the most important passages on peace from Elder Thaddeus' main work, which is Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives, and build a narrative on peace in close connection with the revelation of God on Mount Horeb. So now some positive aspects of peace in Elder Thaddeus. In his masterpiece, Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives, he uses the word peace and its form in more than 300 times. Peace in his vision means something that is acquired from God, a gift from God, a form of enlightenment, and in no way just a form of inner stillness that can be achieved through human means or techniques. According to him, guarding the inner peace is one of the most important goals in Christianity, and the way to peace starts with cultivating quiet and gentle thoughts full of love and forgiveness. His discourse is simple and it is institutionally unaffiliated, but at the same time strong and immutable. In Elder Thaddeus, inner peace has broad implications in community life. The concept of peace is not limited to the realm of social interactions or even to one's own perfection, but it is said to contribute even to cosmic harmony, advancing the topic to the level of Eastern Orthodox mystical theology. So the first aspect could be labeled as weapon against aggression and oppression. When analyzing his constructions of peace, one could identify an outwardly oriented discourse, which could become the basis for solving any political or social conflict and dispute. And I quote, "If you are like that, calm and full of love, and if all you think are good and kind thoughts, then they will stop warring against you in their thoughts and will not threaten you anymore. But if you demand an eye for an eye, that is war. And where there is war, there can be no peace." End of quote. This implies that inner peace, calm, and love are weapons against aggression and oppression within communities and among nations. Inner peace radiates around people and changes others. And I quote, "After that, we see things around us changing. People thoughts also start to change. all because of the peace that radiates from us. We see the thoughts of people around us actually changing. The people are changing, they feel good in our presence. End of quote. So another aspect could be Orthodox missiology par excellence. So inner peace is said to have a visible effect on those around us. And in Elder Thaddeus' thought, this is actually Orthodox missiology par excellence, or the next level of missionary work. Usually, a missionary process implies teaching, speaking, and debating skills, and it can be considered in itself an art of evangelization. But actually, this appears to be only the first step of a very complex process which culminates with the art of preaching without words. And he says, people will be attracted by the peace and warmth in us. They will want to be near us, and the atmosphere of heaven will gradually pass on to them. It is not even necessary to speak to people about this. The atmosphere of heaven will radiate from us even when we keep silence or talk about ordinary things. It will radiate from us even though we may not be aware of it. End of quote. This step is definitely a charismatic work of the Holy Spirit, which engage other senses in the receiver to be able to understand the deep proposal of the Christian spiritual life. It is yet another actualization of the Pentecost. We can easily think about the example of Saint Seraphim of Sarov, whose missionary work with Matavilov was fully accomplished even without using any words. Matavilov was completely edified just by tasting the divine light as a most real energy. This makes us think about a saying often attributed to Saint Francis of Assisi, but there is a debate ongoing on its authenticity, which says, preach the gospel at all times and, if necessary, use words. It is not the real author who is important here, but the fact that the spirit that lies behind this invitation is totally according to the early ascetic tradition of the church, where extreme humility was something very normal. Another aspect could be peace is deeply rooted in the patristic exposition. And our Thaddeus, in order to stress more on the importance of acquiring inner peace, appealed to some patristic sources in order to sustain his discourse. He quotes Saint Isaac the Syrian, who is known to have greatly discussed the elements of inner spiritual life and the encompassing love for all creation. And he says, this is why Saint Isaac the Syrian says, preserve your inner peace at all costs, and do not trade it for anything in this world. He lived in the 7th century. Because of his virtuous life, he lived long. The Holy Father struggled in acquiring peace. One of the Holy Fathers said, the mind is a great wanderer, it is always traveling. It cannot rest until the only one who can lay to rest appears. Honestly, I couldn't find in the reference the exact quote in Saint Isaac the Syrian, and my sense is that this is his own interpretation based on similar passages of Saint Isaac, which I found. He also quotes other patristic writings without mentioning his sources. My sense is that his book is a collection of interviews, and he might have not been particularly interested to offer a fully academic text, but rather simple examples for the spiritual benefit of the believers. Another aspect is temporal, eternal, and cosmic value of peace. Elder Thaddeus talks not only about the benefits of acquiring peace for the present life, in the body, family, and social interactions, but he perceives its eternal value, so that disseminating peace around us becomes a criteria for the last judgment. And he says, we'll have to give an answer for the kind of life we have led. We'll give an answer as to how we use the energy that was given to us. This energy is divine energy and divine strength. We will have to answer for how we have helped in this life. Have we helped by disseminating peace and harmony in the universe, or have we contributed to the existing chaos? For this reason, we must always strive to perfect our thoughts. End of quote. And when it comes to daily life, we can see how inner peace can greatly contribute to the general peaceful atmosphere in the community. And he says, only one person who is prayerfully connected to God is needed. And we will have peace everywhere, in the family, at work, in the government, and everywhere. It is in the presence of such a person that we are freed from gloomy and cumbersome thoughts. End of quote. Moreover, it is a factor of contributing to one's own physical health, maintaining the psychosomatic health as an effect of the bodily harmony. And these constructions even go further from bodily harmony to cosmic harmony, as peaceful thoughts have cosmic implication, creating general harmony, while evil intentions disturb the order of creation. And I quote, if our thoughts are kind, peaceful, and quiet, turn only to our good, then we also influence ourselves and radiate peace all around us, in our family, in the whole country, everywhere. This is true not only here on earth, but in the cosmos as well. By his thoughts, man often disturbs the order of creation. And now, another aspect related to COVID-19 and the sense of inner peace. In the patristic theology, stillness and hesychia acquired important values as preparatory levels of acceding to a life of contemplation. In this sense, hesychasm is a life of silence and undisturbing noises, while hearing the small voice of God. Psalmists try so hard to find peace through different means and in different physical places. But what about the 21st century Christians? How do they find inner peace in the busy heart of a metropolis or in an extended lockdown scenario? Context and conditions of life have changed, but the main quest remains the same, finding the inner peace among the noises of the time, be they noises of war or old workshops, jet engines, metro stations, or gloomy news bulletins. Lockdowns and restrictions preventing or limiting the presence of the believers in the Eucharistic celebration have certainly some ecclesiological implications, which can even question the validity of the respective sacrament. And in my opinion, the presence of Christians in the divine services, while being in a state of fear and unrest, suspicion and effective distancing, can have comparable ecclesiological implications. The solution would be to strive for acquiring peace, especially in this context. And I think the words of Metropolitan Anastasios Vanuatos of Albania, quoting St. Paul, are a good starting point. Whether we live, therefore, or die, we are the Lord's. And a final aspect called God's revelation discerned in a state of inner peace. My thesis is that God's revelation and God's voice is to be discerned in a state of inner peace. Thus, acquiring the peace of the heart should be a particularly important concern for Christians in a pandemic turmoil. Prophet Elijah heard the voice of God as a whispering wind on Mount Horeb, when God was speaking in a still small voice. Therefore, from an Eastern Orthodox Christian view, it is particularly important to notice that God's revelation is perceived at its best in a state of inner peace and hesychia. Be still and know that I am God is the magnificent commandment of the Lord used by Hesychastes to build their daily practice. In Elder Thaddeus' discourse on peace, one can identify two main aspects: the cosmical implication of the peace and the personal implication at the local and temporal level. First, as we observed, inner peace has cosmic implication, contributing to the cosmic harmony, creating general harmony. And how is this achieved? It is a synergy. Man becomes co-worker with God to the general harmony of a new heaven and a new earth through the peaceful thoughts he or she has disseminated in her life. At the moment of last judgment, this personal contribution to the entire world will be fully revealed and an unending revelation of the divinity will commence. And second, related to the personal level, Elder Thaddeus writes, we cannot preserve our inner peace as long as our conscience is telling us something. First, we must surpass our conscience. The Lord will look upon us and illumine us with His grace. And will give us His goodness, for goodness is a divine power that works everywhere, especially in those who earnestly seek the fountain of life. End of quote. We see that searching for peace brings the charismatic action of the Holy Spirit in one's life, and it is a form of spiritual illumination, which is necessarily followed by a form of revelation of the divine. And now some conclusions. It could be said that Elder Thaddeus' vision on peace is not limited to the realm of social interactions or one's own perfection, but it contributes even to cosmic harmony, and it deals with the terminology of Eastern Orthodox mystical theology. On a personal level, the quest for peace brings the charismatic action of the Holy Spirit in one's life, which is a form of spiritual illumination and a revelation. It is in this state when God's voice can be heard fully. Therefore, acquiring inner peace should be a particularly important concern for Christians in a pandemic turmoil. And we know Christians are the salt of the earth, and they should make sure that the salt keeps its saltiness in every circumstance, even when the sugars of a pandemic try to attack it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emil, for this very instructive presentation. Who wants to start the question? I'm sure there are many questions here.
Sure.
I already have some 3 questions, so
Oh,
exactly. I don't want to be the one who asks all the questions. I know I can ask you afterwards if I have others. So please, as I said, feel free to use the chat even during the presentation. You can write your questions there. Okay, I'll try to come with the first question. It seems to me to be a bit obvious, and also to show my my theological ignorance. But I'm not very familiar with the figure of Father Thaddeus of Vitovich. I was just curious how did you came across him? How did you came across his writings, and what pushed you in
yeah,
this
he
direction?
has I would call it masterpieces. Our thoughts determine our lives, which has been translated in Romania, and so I came across it in the Romanian version. But now it seems it's translated in English, and many Orthodox Christians from US or so are familiar with it. So because I noticed that he, in his life, he was from Serbia, Elder Thaddeus of Vitovnica. So in his life, early in his life, he faced crisis or something, a very difficult moment. So ultimately, he found the way to peace somehow. So he's famous for this, for talking about peace and being a peaceful presence among believers. And he was a very peaceful. There are some video interviews with him on the internet because he's almost contemporary to us. He died a few years ago, I think.
Yeah. And he developed this presence of peace you're talking about throughout his life. He wasn't like a presence of peace from the beginning. There are sometimes because sometimes there are people who are, without necessarily being Christians, they just seem to have a presence. They feel in a room. They seem to convey a certain emotion. And I'm just wondering if, in his case, it was a development towards this ability to convey peace.
I think so, and because first of all, it's important to know that um, he found peace, and then he was able to distribute it to others in a way, to share it with others. So the first moment was a kind of revelation, because now we are in the context of God's revelation. I think even this peace in his life was a kind of revelation from God. And then he was able to become a very peaceful presence. If you look in the interviews, you will see that he was very calm, old man. It's like nothing can disturb him. And then he was able to share it with others and helped many people who faced troubles and unrest and different conditions in life, as I understand.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't want to monopolize the discussion, so please, again, feel free to ask any question. Okay, I might have a shot at another one, Emil. So you don't mind me. I was curious because I think this idea of someone who is a peaceful person, let's say, and who exudes peace towards those around him. This is a very nice and spiritual idea, but sometimes the spiritual life is opposed to, let's say, social life. And even if in the gospel you have this happy those who are making peace, not necessarily those who through their presence are creating an atmosphere of peace, but those who are making peace and those who are supporting, let's say, even in societies that are divided by war, peace. Does he have any kind of reflection on something like that? Especially since you said that he was somehow contemporary, I'm sure he witnessed to a certain extent, even in the mass media, um, the wars in Yugoslavia. So I was thinking maybe he had something to say on that. Have you found something in his work about this kind of peace, social rebuilding?
Honestly, I'm not sure, but I think there should be something, because he, as I know, he lived during the communist regime in former Yugoslavia. So he was, if I recall correctly, he was even in prison during that regime. So probably some parts of his discourse on peace can be really connected to this attitude against the oppression of the authorities, the communist authorities at that time. So I have to search in this, and maybe I can make a connection, because a very nice idea that some people are creating peace, in a political context or so, but they are not necessarily very peaceful figures. And I should search deeper in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think there are some written comments.
Are they? Okay, let's see. Okay, so yes, there are plenty of questions actually. Sorry. So I'm gonna start with the first question from Viorel Coman. Is always peace a locus of revelation or situation of conflict and tension could equally become sources of revelation? So I think, yes, would you think that we can find peace, sources of revelation could also be found in situation of crisis and conflict? Emil?
Yeah. I was thinking about it. Yeah, I think, in very hard situations like wars or there is a quote in St. Paul which says that, and where there is an abundance of hardships or sins or so, the grace abounds. So I think this grace is able to be a source of revelation even in the very dark times of our history.
Okay, thank you.
I
I'll
have to read it more attentive. And I will think about it. Thank you.
okay. I'll go to the next question from Edward Eldon, who asks if you you can say something about how this discussion of peace relates to mental health issues like anxiety and depression.
Now, if Edward mentioned depression and anxiety, I think this was the hardship that Elder Thaddeus faced in his life. That crisis was actually a kind of depression or anxiety. And ultimately, it seems he managed to survive and find a way to peace. In Christianity, peace is a person. In theology, we say Christ is our peace, and He gives to the world a peace that others cannot give it. But in a case of acute disease, which a mental disorder, let's say, or a disability, it's something that we should reflect more on it. It is always the work of grace which is able to heal anyone here. And that person facing an illness may not be able to consciously work towards acquiring peace, towards cultivating. As Elder Tadej says, you have to cultivate gentle and kind thoughts. This is the starting point. And maybe in case of severe mental disorder, you cannot focus on that. And in that case, I think it's only the abundance of grace that can really help that person. But the connection with disability would be a good point to write it down here and reflect on it. I think Petri will like the idea.
I would, yes. That's true. And okay, I think Father Stephen has a question, but
very brief. I share my parish and my daily offices with a psychotic monk, an old man who's 87 years old, and it's always amazing to me that he's survived all these years with such a serious handicap. At the age of 20, he was declared psychologically, what we call in French, invalid. So I would like to be able to read some of these texts of Father Thaddeus to him, but where can I find them in English? You said they exist, but do you have a title? Do you have a website, or where would I look for them, Emil?
The book of Elder Thaddeus.
What is the title?
It's Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives.
Okay.
But I do have I shouldn't say this, I have a PDF version.
I want a pirated copy, if that's what you're not willing to say over there. If you have a pirated copy, you have my email, please do send it to me. And I will translate this from English into French to my friend, Father John.
You never heard this from me.
Well, it's going to be on the internet. So. Anyway, a very last question, because before we move to our next speaker, I'm sorry, but you had a very intriguing presentation, I think, instructive presentation. Many people wanted to know more. This is from Slavisha Kostic, who's trying to see if you could speak a bit more about the link between acquiring inner peace and development of good thoughts.
Yeah, I think this was the starting point, as I recall, that Elder Thaddeus proposed. Like, if you are embarking in that journey of acquiring inner peace, then you have to start with the basic steps, like cultivating gentle thoughts, even in daily, very, very normal daily context and situations. You have to start with the ABC, and then shortly you will gain some kind of peace, which is a gift from God in answer to your effort of cultivating kind thought. I think so.
Thank you very much, Emil. And
I thank you for your comments, and definitely I can work on it more.
Thank you.